So when most people think about finesse baits as far as bass fishing goes, they often think about catching small fish, numbers of fish, and having to weed through them to try to get to the desired size that they want, right? It's kind of a last-ditch effort for most guys. It's not their first go-to option. But it doesn't always have to be that way. There's some finesse baits, and one in particular that I'm going to talk about today, that actually does catch big fish on a consistent basis. It's not just one of those baits that you catch a big fish on every now and then, like a drop shot or something like that. This is a bait that consistently catches big fish and is used in tournaments all across the country for all kinds of different species. And that bait that we're going to talk about today is a shaky head. So why is a shaky head the most underrated finesse bait? Well, there's a lot of different reasons that I'm going to talk about specifically, but the first one that I want to talk about is that, like I said, it catches big fish. You can change out the size of the worm that you have on here and change out for the depth that you're at, but it catches big fish, and specifically it catches big smallmouth, big largemouth, and big spotted bass, which is something that I love about finesse baits. I don't like throwing a finesse bait if it's leaning toward smallmouth or spotted bass or largemouth, because a lot of times if you're throwing just a big worm on a drop shot, a lot of times it's not necessarily geared towards smallmouth. You're only going to catch largemouth, maybe spotted bass, but if you throw a Ned rig, a lot of times you're leaning more towards smallmouth and spotted bass, not so much big largemouth, although they do catch big fish from time to time. But one bait that everybody kind of overlooks is that shaky head, and when they hear people catching big fish on it, they're like, oh, right, he caught it on a shaky head. They don't even think twice about it, but how often do you actually have it on your deck? I know that's something that I personally this year in my tournament series have started throwing tremendously, is that shaky head, and it's caught me some really big fish, and it's done really, really well for me. So real quick, guys, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, go ahead and hit that now so you can follow along with the regular content coming out every Tuesday at 7 p.m. But let's dive back in to a shaky head. So the second reason that I think a shaky head is the most overlooked finesse bait is the versatility of cover that you can fish this bait through. And by cover, I also mean depth. By changing just the head size on that, you can fish that bait from 2 feet all the way out to, you know, as deep as you really want. You can put an ounce head on this and drag it on a ledge in 100 feet of water if you really wanted to, but it does a great job at catching schooling fish, catching, you know, fish grouped up on a ledge, catching fish around the spawn especially. And that's something that you don't see with all finesse baits. It also does a great job at fishing around brush, fishing through rock, fishing through grass, and that's something that you also don't see very often. You know, if you're thinking about a drop shot or a Nico rig, there's a limitation to all of those. You can't really fish a Nico rig through grass very well. It's going to get hung up, it's going to get caught. You know, a drop shot, it's harder to fish through thicker grass, whereas a shaky head, you can throw it out there and drag it right through and hop it through, and because of the weedless versatility of that, you can fish it through everything. But it also fishes phenomenally through rock, which is something that I have done a ton of this year, and it does a really, really good job of not getting hung up, which is something that I absolutely love with my finesse bait. There is nothing more frustrating than making a cast when I'm looking at a fish on live scope or I know it's going to be a hot spot, and I get so excited and it gets into the juice. You know, you're feeling it come through the rock real nice, you hit that nice rocky spot, you hit that brush pile, and all of a sudden it just, you know, you get stuck and you have to break it off because it wedges right in there. And especially in a tournament setting, because I don't know if you guys think about this at all, but when you break something off, I'm pretty sure it sounds like a gunshot going off under the water. So I don't think those fish are going to feed too well after that. So when you throw bait in there in the tournament, you don't want to go get it out either, because you're like, well, that's the juice. And so having a finesse bait that can come through that cover really, really well is a really, really key part of my versatility, because I like to throw baits that I can throw in all different situations and be the best with it that I can possibly be. Having the confidence to throw that bait in there and being able to work it through without getting it stuck. So another big thing that you see with a shaky head that you don't see with a lot of other finesse baits is A, the size of it that I can fish with. So I can fish it faster than most other finesse baits, you know, hopping it along the bottom and dragging it. That's a big plus for me to cover more water. And it also catches fish all different times of the year. That's something that you really don't ever see. You know, a drop shot shines in the summertime and maybe in the spring when they're on beds, but in the fall it's really not as popular of a bait, whereas a shaky head, man, catches them all conditions, all times of the year, all sizes of fish, like I've said. I was having this conversation with my buddy on the phone the other day. We were talking about baits to throw when I was on Toledo Bend. And he was like, well, what are you throwing in those brush piles? And I said, a shaky head. And he goes, yeah, them son of a guns will always eat a shaky head. And that's something that, you know, those southern guys know a lot of, but the northern guys, we don't throw it as much. So if it's something that you haven't been throwing, a shaky head is a great option to start with because, like I said, it's going to catch all different sizes and big fish especially. Now, the gear that I like to throw a shaky head on is going to be one of two setups. I try to throw on a bait caster as much as physically possible just because I like the leverage of it. And especially if I'm around brush, I like to throw that. But I typically try to throw it on 12-pound P-line tactical fluorocarbon, and I have a 7.2 arc rod that I'm going to link down below. It's an Invoker Limited series, and it just has a super soft tip, and man, when I hook them on that bait, they're coming to the boat. That is something that I haven't talked about a shaky head yet, and when I hook a fish on a shaky head, you can bet the house it's coming to the boat. Unless it breaks off or something crazy because I have a nick in my line, those big single hook baits, man, you can always count on those fish coming to the boat, and that's something that you can't count on with so many other baits. So having that confidence to hook a fish and get it to the boat is extremely critical. As far as the gear ratio reel, I like to have it on an 8:2 to 1, and a lot of times I'll pair it with a Shimano SLX or a Shimano Corrado K, but again, I stick with those Shimanos. I have the most confidence that they're not going to fail at any cost whatsoever. If you hook a big fish, you can just thumb the reel. So like if they get close to the boat and they decide to dig, I don't ever use the drag. I'll just click the reel and kind of thumb it and let them free go, you know, with just putting the pressure on it with my thumb. But the other rod that I'm going to use is a 7.1 Arc Essence spinning rod, and I'll pair that with 10 15-pound P-line TCB braid and then a 10-pound P-line tactical fluorocarbon leader. That's if I'm getting in more finesse situations where the, you know, clear water, I think those fish are going to be line shy, trying to make longer casts. But if I'm on a, you know, a little bit stingier water, that's when I try to go to that bait caster as much as physically possible. You know, if I'm around more brush versus if I'm fishing rock, I might want to go to that lighter line to kind of get some of those fish that I think might be line shy. So as always, guys, I will have all the gear linked down below that we just talked about. And also, don't be afraid to check out this video where I talk about my drop shot setup and what I think other people should be doing with it, because a drop shot is also a phenomenal tool that I use a ton in my arsenal when I need to get bites. But thank you guys so much for watching. God bless, and I hope y'all take care.